My husband thought he was an evil genius when he planned to steal my billion-dollar company and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know was that I'd been watching him for months, and his entire scheme was about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. Mark, my husband, wasn't just trying to leave me. He was planning to take everything we built and tarnish my reputation so I would never fight back. But Mark made one fatal mistake. He forgot that the woman he was planning to betray wasn't just his wife. I was the technical genius who actually understood how every system worked, who every investor trusted, and where every digital footprint led. While he was busy plotting my destruction with his new strategic advisor, who was actually his mistress, I was documenting every move, every lie, every stolen credit. By the time Mark served me with divorce papers, thinking he'd outsmarted me completely, I had gathered enough evidence to destroy not just his reputation, but his entire future. This is the story of how the man who tried to erase me from my own success ended up losing everything instead: his company, his fortune, his credibility, and the woman he thought would help him steal it all. The first red flag should have been when he hired Chloe Richardson, a 28-year-old Ivy League MBA with perfectly styled blonde hair and zero technical experience. Mark introduced her as our strategic advisor, but she immediately started attending meetings I was suddenly too busy to join. When I questioned why crucial product decisions were being made without the person who built the product, Mark would smile condescendingly and say, "Maya, you're brilliant with code, but business strategy requires a different skill set." The exclusions escalated quickly. Passwords I'd created for systems I'd built were changed without notice. When I asked about it, Mark claimed our security consultant recommended restricting access to essential personnel only. The investor meetings I'd arranged through my network suddenly became executive-level discussions, where my technical expertise would be too detailed for the big picture. But the moment I knew something was seriously wrong came during a call with the prominent tech blog, TechCrunch, about our upcoming IPO announcement. I was in our home office when I heard Mark on the phone in the next room, his voice carrying that particular confidence he used with reporters. The breakthrough innovation came from years of development and strategic thinking, he said smoothly. I've always been hands-on with the technical architecture, working closely with our development team to bring this vision to reality. Our development team. As if I was just another programmer following his instructions, instead of the architect who had invented the entire system he was describing as his own creation. Everything I had built, every algorithm, every client relationship, every innovative solution was being systematically rewritten with Mark as the author and me as a footnote. The discovery that changed everything happened at 3:40 a.m. on a Tuesday night in May. I was working on a critical client data update, and it required the highest levels of access that only Mark's or my laptop had. Mark's laptop was closer than mine, so I grabbed it. That's when his email auto-synced, and I saw a message thread that made my blood turn to ice. The subject line read, "Pre-IPO strategy, confidential." The sender was Victoria Hayes, a lawyer I'd never heard of. But it was the message content that destroyed my world in 30 seconds of reading. Phase 1 complete, Victoria had written just 2 days earlier. We've successfully repositioned Maya as non-essential technical staff in all IPO documentation. Her name appears nowhere as a founder or key contributor. The prenuptial agreement protects your equity completely. My hands started shaking as I scrolled down to see Mark's response. Perfect timing. Maya's getting suspicious about being excluded from strategy meetings. We need to accelerate the timeline. File divorce papers the week after IPO launch. She'll be too shocked and distracted to mount an effective legal challenge. No one would ever think to look at our company communications. But it was Chloe's contribution to the thread that made me physically nauseous. The investor presentation is ready. I've positioned myself as co-founder and technical visionary. Maya's contributions have been reframed as contractor-level coding assistance under Mark's direction. The Ivy League MBA credentials are selling the narrative perfectly. I sat in that dark office, staring at 3 years of my life being systematically erased in legal language. The prenup I'd signed, the one Mark had presented as standard protection for both of us, was apparently an elaborate trap designed to steal my company. The email chain went back 6 months. 6 months of planning my professional assassination while I worked 18-hour days to prepare for the IPO that would make them millionaires and leave me with nothing. The final message in the thread was from yesterday. Mark, remember, document any technical errors or delays you can attribute to Maya's work. We need a paper trail showing declining performance to justify her removal from core operations. Every system crash, every debugging session, every late night I'd spent fixing problems, Mark had been documenting them as evidence of my incompetence rather than my dedication. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence, my mind racing between fury and disbelief. The man I'd built a company with, the man I'd married, had been methodically destroying me for half a year. And Chloe, the woman I'd tried to mentor and include, was actively helping him steal credit for work that came from my brain and my hands. For about 10 minutes, I considered storming into our bedroom and confronting them both. I imagined throwing the laptop at Mark's head and demanding explanations that would probably just be more lies. But then something shifted inside me. Maybe it was my engineer's mind kicking in, or maybe it was pure survival instinct, but I realized that confrontation would only give them time to cover their tracks and accelerate their timeline. Instead, I did what I do best. I started gathering data. I quietly screenshotted every email, uploaded them to a secure cloud account they couldn't access, and began the most important documentation project of my life. If Mark and Chloe wanted to play systematic games with my future, they were about to discover that I was infinitely better at systems than they were. The server crisis that had led me to this discovery suddenly felt like destiny. While I fixed their technical emergency at 4 a.m., they were sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that their victim had just become their greatest threat. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a digital detective in my own life, and what I discovered was more devastating than I'd imagined possible. Every day brought new evidence of how thoroughly Mark and Chloe had been erasing me from the company I'd built. My first target was our GitHub repository, the detailed record of who had written what code and when. What I found made me physically ill. Mark had been systematically rewriting the commit history to show himself as the author of my breakthrough algorithms. The AI engine that was the heart of our platform? According to the doctored records, Mark had written it 5 years ago. In reality, I'd created it over 6 months of intensive development, and I had the original timestamps on my personal backup drives to prove it. But the GitHub manipulation was just the beginning. I started recording Mark's calls with investors, and the lies were breathtaking. In one conversation with a leading global investment bank about our IPO valuation, I heard him say, "Maya's been helpful with implementation, but she's essentially a skilled coding assistant who follows technical specifications I provide. Real innovation and business strategy have always been my domain." A coding assistant. The woman who had invented every core feature was being described as someone who followed instructions. I dug deeper into Mark's communications and found messages between him and Chloe that revealed the scope of their deception. Chloe had been presenting my user interface designs to investors as her own work, complete with detailed explanations of design psychology and user experience theory, concepts she'd learned by stealing my documentation and presentations. The personal betrayal cut even deeper when I discovered their affair. Hotel receipts showed matching stays in San Francisco, Chicago, and New York during supposed separate business trips. But it was their text messages that showed the true callousness of their scheme. Mark to Chloe, "Maya actually thinks the IPO will set us up for life together. She has no idea she'll be lucky to walk away with the house." Chloe's response, "The technical incompetence narrative is working perfectly. Even she's starting to doubt her contributions when I question her decisions in meetings. They weren't just stealing my company, they were gaslighting me into believing I hadn't earned what I'd built." The financial investigation revealed the most sophisticated part of their plan. Mark had been transferring company profits to accounts I couldn't access, using fake consulting fees and equipment purchases that didn't exist. Over 18 months, he'd moved $6.3 million into hidden accounts, money that should have been reinvested in the company or saved for our future. But the smoking gun came when I found his practice sessions for investor meetings. Mark had been secretly recording himself trying to explain technical concepts he didn't understand, using my documentation as a script. In one recording, he struggled for 10 minutes to explain how our core algorithm worked, eventually giving up and muttering, "Maya handles the technical details, but the business vision is what matters." The irony was devastating. He couldn't even fake understanding the technology well enough to steal credit convincingly. I compiled everything into an encrypted digital vault. Dr. GitHub commits with timestamps proving the fraud, recorded calls where Mark lied to investors, financial records showing hidden assets, text messages revealing the affair and their mocking contempt for me, and audio of Mark's technical incompetence. But I didn't stop at gathering evidence. I reached out quietly to our original investor, Dr. Sally Collins, who had funded us specifically because of my technical innovation. I arranged a coffee meeting under the pretense of discussing post-IPO expansion plans. "Sally," I said carefully, "if you discovered that the technical leadership of a company wasn't what it appeared to be, how would that affect your investment decisions?" Her response was immediate and sharp. "Maya, my investment in Streamline AI was based entirely on your technical capabilities. If I found out someone else was taking credit for your work, I'd consider it investment fraud." That conversation gave me the final piece of my strategy. I wasn't just gathering evidence to protect myself in a divorce. I was building a case that would expose a systematic fraud that threatened everyone who'd invested in what they believed was Mark's innovation. By the end of 2 weeks, I had everything I needed to destroy their scheme. The only question left was timing. The final weeks before our IPO became a masterclass in psychological warfare, and I had a front-row seat to my own professional assassination. Mark's confidence had reached toxic levels. He was so certain of his plan's success that he stopped even pretending to value my contributions. The breaking point came during our final pre-IPO presentation to the board of directors. I walked into the conference room expecting to present the technical roadmap I'd spent weeks preparing, only to find my name absent from the agenda entirely. "Maya will be available for any technical support questions," Mark announced to the room of investors, gesturing toward a chair in the back corner like I was an IT contractor. "But today's presentation focuses on strategic vision and market positioning." I watched from that back corner as Chloe presented my user interface designs as her own breakthrough innovations. She stood confidently at the head of the table, clicking through slides that showcased my work while explaining design principles she'd clearly memorized from my documentation. The intuitive user experience was the result of extensive psychological research and iterative testing, Chloe said smoothly, discussing features I developed through months of user feedback analysis. Understanding cognitive load theory was crucial to creating this seamless interface. The board members nodded appreciatively, completely unaware they were looking at stolen intellectual property wrapped in Ivy League business school vocabulary. In all these, I didn't make a fuss. I wanted Mark to keep thinking that I was the silent and compliant wife. I didn't want to tip him off. But the moment that sealed Mark's fate came when board member Dr. Richards asked a detailed question about our core algorithm's machine learning architecture. Mark's face went blank as he realized he'd need to explain technology he fundamentally didn't understand. "Well, the algorithmic framework leverages advanced neural networking protocols," he stammered, using buzzwords that meant nothing. "The key is optimizing data throughput through innovative processing methodologies." Dr. Richards looked confused. "I'm sorry, Mark, but could you explain specifically how your predictive modeling handles temporal data clustering?" The silence stretched painfully as Mark glanced desperately toward me, clearly hoping I'd bail him out. When I remained silent, he deflected. "Maya can provide those implementation details later. The important thing for this board is understanding market scalability." After the meeting, I overheard Chloe reassuring concerned investors. "Mark prefers to focus on big-picture strategy rather than getting bogged down in technical minutiae. That's why we have such strong technical support staff." Technical support staff. The woman who'd invented their billion-dollar technology had been relegated to IT support in her own company's IPO presentation. That evening, their text messages revealed the depth of their contempt. "Mark, Maya looked so pathetic sitting in the back today. I almost felt bad." "Chloe, please." She's been coasting on your vision for years. About time she learned her place. Mark, can't wait until this IPO is done and we can stop pretending she matters. But the final insult came 3 days later when TechCrunch published an exclusive interview with Mark titled, "The Visionary Behind Streamline AI's Revolutionary Technology." Reading it felt like watching someone steal my identity in real time. The breakthrough came after months of intensive development work, Mark told the interviewer. I had to do all the real engineering work myself. The complex algorithms, the innovative user interface, the predictive modeling that makes our platform unique. Building a technical team that could execute my vision was the biggest challenge. He claimed he'd personally coded the core AI engine and pioneered the interface design principles that our competitors are now trying to copy. Every innovation I'd created was attributed to his hands-on technical leadership and engineering background. The article included a photo of Mark at a computer, supposedly demonstrating the code he'd written. I recognized that screen. It was displaying my work, algorithms I debugged at 3 a.m. while he slept peacefully upstairs. As I read that interview, something fundamental shifted inside me. The woman who'd been documenting evidence for weeks transformed into something more dangerous, a strategist with nothing left to lose and everything needed to win. I opened my encrypted files and began crafting the response that would destroy everything they'd stolen. They wanted to erase me from my own success story? Perfect. They'd given me exactly the motivation I needed to expose them completely. Mark and Chloe had made one critical miscalculation. They assumed that stealing credit meant I'd lost the ability to prove ownership. But engineers don't just create, we document, backup, and timestamp everything. Their systematic erasure was about to become their systematic destruction. On Tuesday morning at 6 a.m., exactly 72 hours before Streamline AI's scheduled IPO launch, I published an article on Medium that would detonate their entire scheme. The title was simple and devastating: The Woman Who Actually Built Streamline AI, a technical deep dive into stolen innovation. I didn't lead with emotion or personal betrayal. Instead, I opened with irrefutable technical proof that would make any software engineer's blood boil. Side-by-side code comparisons showing my original algorithms next to the innovations Mark claimed to have developed. Timestamps from my personal Git repositories proving I'd written core functions months before Mark even claimed to understand them. The article included audio recordings of Mark's fumbling attempts to explain basic technical concepts, contrasted with my detailed explanations of the same systems to our original investor. I embedded screenshots of our GitHub commit history showing the systematic revision of authorship, with technical analysis that proved the doctored timestamps. But the kill shot was a section titled, "The Ivy League MBA Who Stole UI Designs." I included Chloe's investor presentations alongside my original design documents, complete with timestamps and iteration notes that predated her involvement with the company by over a year. Within 3 hours, the article had 50,000 views. By noon, it was trending on the news with a comment thread that was absolutely savaging Mark's credibility. Real software engineers were dissecting his public statements and identifying the technical impossibilities in his claims. TechCrunch picked up the story at 2 p.m. with the headline "Streamline AI IPO in Chaos as Co-Founder Alleges Systematic IP Theft." Within minutes, my phone was ringing with interview requests from every major tech publication. But I wasn't done. While the internet was dissecting Mark's technical incompetence, I was launching Strike 2, a comprehensive legal assault that would freeze their stolen assets and invalidate their fraudulent paperwork. My attorney filed simultaneous motions for emergency injunction preventing IPO launch pending fraud investigation, invalidation of the prenuptial agreement based on fraudulent concealment, criminal referral for intellectual property theft and financial fraud, forensic audit of all company assets and hidden accounts. You see, before we got married, Mark, under false pretenses, made me sign a prenup that I was not entitled to any business we conceived together in the marriage. The prenup he thought would protect him became evidence of premeditated fraud when my lawyer demonstrated that I'd signed it under false pretenses, believing I was protecting our shared assets, not waiving my rights to a company I was actively building. Strike three came at 4 p.m. when Dr. Sally Collins, our original investor, released a public statement that sent shockwaves through the tech financing world. My investment in Streamline AI was based entirely on Maya Johnson's technical innovation and leadership. The systematic misrepresentation of her contributions constitutes investment fraud. I am withdrawing my support for the IPO and demanding a full forensic review of the company's technical assets and leadership STR. That statement triggered a cascade of investor panic. The financial firm handling the IPO postponed pending resolution of leadership disputes. Two other major investors demanded emergency meetings to reassess their positions. By 6 p.m., Mark was in full crisis mode. I watched through our security cameras as he paced frantically through the office, screaming into his phone at lawyers who were probably telling him exactly how screwed he was. Chloe's response was more calculated and infinitely more cowardly. She released her own statement attempting to distance herself from the fraud. I relied on Mark's representations about the company's technical development. If these allegations are true, I was deceived along with the investors. The tech community's response was swift and brutal. The hashtag #MayaBuiltStreamlineAI began trending on Twitter within hours, with software engineers sharing their own stories of having work stolen by non-technical partners. Women in tech rallied around the story, sharing screenshots of the article and calling for industry-wide accountability. The most satisfying moment came when Hacker News users began posting technical challenges directly to Mark's social media, asking him to explain basic concepts about his algorithms. His silence was deafening and damning. By the end of that first day, Mark's reputation wasn't just damaged, it was completely obliterated. The man who'd built his identity around being a tech visionary had been exposed as a fraud who couldn't code "Hello World" without help. But this was just the beginning. The systematic destruction of Mark and Chloe's scheme would take weeks to fully unfold, and every revelation would be more satisfying than the last. The most telling part? Mark didn't come home that night. After my article went viral and his world imploded, I sat in our empty house listening to his key never turn in the lock. No confrontation, no angry demands for explanations, no attempts to salvage our marriage or his reputation. Just silence. His clothes remained untouched in our closet. His coffee mug sat unused in the Kit Collins sink. The man who'd spent months systematically planning my destruction couldn't even face me now that I'd systematically destroyed him back. I found out through our security cameras that he'd been sleeping in his office, too ashamed or too cowardly to come home and face the wife who'd outplayed him completely. The irony was perfect. The man who'd claimed I was just technical support was now too intimidated by my strategic brilliance to even enter his own house. Despite the chaos, Mark's arrogance convinced him he could salvage the IPO through sheer force of will and media manipulation. What followed was the most spectacular public meltdown in tech IPO history. Streamline AI's stock debut was supposed to open at $85 per share, valuing the company at $15 billion. Instead, it crashed to $21 within the first hour of trading as investors fled the uncertainty around our leadership crisis. By market close, we'd lost $12 billion in theoretical value. But Mark's real destruction came during the emergency press conference he called to address the unfounded allegations. Watching him attempt damage control was like watching a man drown in public. The core technology of Streamline AI represents years of my personal development work, he told the assembled reporters, his voice shaking slightly. These claims about technical authorship are simply vindictive attacks from a disgruntled employee. A disgruntled employee. He demoted me from wife to employee in his desperation. Bloomberg's tech reporter immediately followed up. Can you explain how your predictive modeling handles edge case scenarios in real-time data processing? Mark's face went blank. Well, the algorithmic frameworks we've developed utilize sophisticated data management protocols that optimize. He trailed off, clearly hoping technical buzzwords would mask his complete ignorance. Specifically, how does your machine learning model prevent overfitting with sparse training data? The reporter pressed. That's getting into proprietary implementation details that I can't discuss publicly, Mark stammered. I watched the live stream from my lawyer's office, live tweeting technical corrections to every fumbling response he gave. When he claimed our AI used advanced neural networking protocols, I tweeted, "Streamline AI uses a random forest algorithm with gradient boosting. There are no neural networks in our core system." My real-time fact-checking gained 200,000 retweets in 2 hours, with software engineers adding their own commentary about Mark's technical illiteracy. The hashtag #MarkCan'tCode started trending in the country. The professional exodus began that afternoon. Our lead engineer, David Collins, posted on LinkedIn, "After 3 years at Streamline AI, I'm joining Maya Johnson's new venture, AuthenticCore. I've always known who the real technical leader was." Within 48 hours, 8 of our 12 senior engineers had resigned to join my new company. They took with them institutional knowledge that Mark couldn't replace and client relationships he'd never actually built. Our biggest client, Meridian Corp, called an emergency meeting. "We need assurance that our platform integration won't be compromised by this leadership transition," their CTO said bluntly. Our $5 million contract was based on Maya's technical guarantees. Without her involvement, we're reconsidering our partnership. 3 other major clients sent similar notices within the week. But Chloe's betrayal of Mark was the most satisfying twist. Facing her own career destruction, she threw him completely under the bus in a Wall Street Journal interview that ran with the headline, "Harvard MBA claims she was deceived by tech fraud." "I trusted Mark's representations about his technical contributions," she said, somehow managing to look both innocent and calculating. "If these allegations are proven true, then I was misled just like the investors. My business analysis was based on false information about the company's actual technical leadership." She even had the audacity to position herself as another victim. "As a woman in tech, I'm particularly disturbed by any attempt to steal credit from female innovators. Maya's work should have been properly recognized from the beginning." The irony was breathtaking. The woman who'd helped steal my work was now claiming to be a champion of women's rights in technology. Mark's response to Chloe's betrayal was a furious Twitter rant that only made him look more unhinged. "Chloe Richardson knew about every business decision we made together. She's trying to save her own career by lying about our partnership. Hashtag Chloe knew." The public meltdown was complete. The man who'd planned to steal everything had lost his company, his co-conspirator, and his reputation in less than a week. 3 months later, Mark's destruction reached its crescendo at TechCrunch Disrupt, the industry's most prestigious conference. He'd somehow convinced the organizers to let him give a presentation titled "Lessons in Tech Leadership During Crisis," apparently believing he could rehabilitate his image through corporate speaking. What happened instead was the most viewed tech conference disaster in internet history. Standing on that stage in front of 3,000 industry leaders, Mark attempted to defend his technical credentials by explaining Streamline AI's core algorithm. The result was 10 minutes of pure technological gibberish that had engineers in the audience openly laughing. "Our machine learning infrastructure leverages quantum-enhanced data paradigms," he said confidently, using words that sounded impressive but meant absolutely nothing together. An audience member shouted, "That's not even a real technology." Mark's response was to double down. "We've pioneered revolutionary approaches to artificial intelligence that transcend traditional computing limitations." The audience's laughter turned into open mockery. Someone started the slow clap. The video of Mark's meltdown went viral within hours, racking up 50 million views and spawning countless memes about quantum-enhanced data paradigms. But the real victory came the next day when I announced AuthenticCore's series of funding, $2 billion valuation led by the same investors who'd fled Streamline AI. Dr. Sally Collins's investment firm issued a statement that was essentially a public execution. AuthenticCore represents the authentic technical innovation we thought we were funding with Streamline AI. Maya Johnson's leadership and genuine expertise make this a significantly stronger investment opportunity. Meanwhile, Streamline AI's value had collapsed to under $100 million. Without the engineering team, without major clients, and without anyone who actually understood the technology, the company was hemorrhaging money and facing multiple lawsuits from investors who felt deceived. The legal victories kept mounting. The court awarded me 60% equity in Streamline AI, ruling that the prenuptial agreement was procured through fraudulent misrepresentation of material facts. The judge's written opinion was scathing. Mr. Johnson systematically concealed his wife's foundational contributions while planning to appropriate her intellectual property. This represents fraud of the most calculated variety. Mark's personal destruction was equally complete. Chloe had moved to London, taking a position with a consulting firm and distancing herself completely from the scandal. The lawsuits were piling up: securities fraud, investor deception, intellectual property theft. His legal fees alone were bankrupting him. But the moment that truly showed how far he'd fallen came 6 months after the IPO disaster. I was in my new AuthenticCore office, overlooking downtown San Francisco, when my assistant buzzed in. "Maya, there's someone here to see you. He says he's your husband." Mark stood in my reception area looking like a broken man. His expensive suits had been replaced by wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt. The confident tech executive was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate and defeated. "Maya, we need to talk," he said quietly. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we built something together and maybe we can work something out." He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't apologizing for the betrayal. He was asking for money. "I'm struggling with the legal fees," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I know AuthenticCore is doing well. Maybe there's a way I could consult, or we could restructure the Streamline AI equity, or..." I looked at this man who'd tried to steal my life's work and leave me with nothing, now begging for financial help from the company I'd built to replace the one he'd destroyed. "Mark," I said calmly, "I'm sorry, but you don't have the technical qualifications we're looking for." The look on his face, the moment he realized that his victim had become everything he'd pretended to be, was worth every sleepless night I'd spent documenting his betrayal. Justice had never felt so perfectly complete. 1 year after Mark's spectacular downfall, I stood in a bankruptcy courthouse, watching the auctioneer sell off Streamline AI's remaining assets. The company that had once been valued at $15 billion was being liquidated for $12 million. And I was the highest bidder. The irony was intoxicating. I was buying back the company I'd actually built for less than 1% of what Mark had tried to steal from me. Every algorithm, every client relationship, every innovation he'd claimed as his own was finally coming home where it belonged. "Sold to AuthenticCore Industries," the auctioneer announced, and I felt a satisfaction deeper than any revenge fantasy could have provided. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine, it was about officially becoming what I'd always been, the true founder and CEO of what would become the most successful AI platform in the industry. The acquisition allowed me to merge Streamline AI's remaining client base with AuthenticCore's superior technology. Within 6 months, we'd rebuilt those relationships stronger than ever, with clients who now knew exactly who had been solving their problems all along. The media recognition that followed was everything Mark had craved but never deserved. Forbes featured me on their cover with the headline, "Self-Made Tech Billionaire, the woman who built an empire twice." The photo was taken in the same office where Mark had once relegated me to the back corner as technical support. But the sweetest moment came when I learned that Mark was applying for entry-level software engineering positions at startups, positions he was consistently rejected for because he couldn't pass basic coding tests. Meanwhile, my face was appearing on magazine covers as one of the most innovative leaders in technology. My first official day as CEO of the merged company was deeply symbolic. I walked into that same conference room where Mark had introduced me as technical support to the board of directors and hung my nameplate on the door, Maya Johnson, founder and CEO. The engineering team that had followed me to AuthenticCore was finally reunited under my official leadership. David Collins, our lead engineer, captured the moment perfectly in his LinkedIn post. "Today we're not just working for Maya Johnson, we're officially working for the founder who actually built everything we're proud to develop." The full circle was complete. The invisible architect had become the celebrated leader. The woman they'd tried to erase was now the industry standard for authentic innovation. And the company they'd tried to steal was stronger than ever under the leadership of its true creator. Mark's plan to leave me with nothing had backfired so completely that I ended up with everything, including the satisfaction of knowing I'd earned every bit of it twice. Looking back on this journey, the most important transformation wasn't just reclaiming my company, it was discovering the power of refusing to be invisible. For too many years, I'd accepted being the genius behind someone else's success, believing that my work would eventually speak for itself. But here's what I learned. Your work can't speak if someone else is controlling the microphone. The response to my story has been overwhelming. Hundreds of women and men have reached out with their own experiences of having contributions stolen, credit taken, and expertise minimized. Software engineers whose code was claimed by non-technical co-founders. Designers whose innovations were attributed to marketing teams. Researchers whose breakthroughs were published under someone else's name. The tech industry has started implementing new standards for recognizing founder contributions, partly because investors realize that misrepresenting technical leadership is a massive risk factor. Venture capital firms now require detailed documentation of who actually built what before writing checks. But the personal transformation runs deeper than professional vindication. I used to seek approval for my ideas, defer to others' business expertise, and minimize my own contributions to keep peace. Now I command rooms, set strategic direction, and take credit for innovations that come from my mind and my hands. The documentation that saved my company taught me something crucial about self-advocacy. Evidence isn't just legal protection, it's proof of your own worth when the world tries to convince you that you don't matter. To everyone who's ever felt invisible in their own success story, here's what I want you to know. Your contributions have value, your expertise matters, and you deserve recognition for what you create. Document your work, protect your innovations, and never let anyone convince you that you're just anything. If this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their contributions matter. Because in a world that profits from making brilliant people invisible, the most revolutionary thing we can do is refuse to disappear. The difference between being called CEO and earning the title authentically? One is a label someone gives you. The other is power you take for yourself.